For many Americans, the events of the past couple of years can seem utterly unprecedented. Few can remember a time when the country was so dramatically polarized. According to the Reuters news agency, in the year leading up to the 2024 presidential election, there were over 300 acts of political violence in the United States, with another 150 in the first 6 months of 2025. This represents the biggest surge in political violence since the early 1970s. And for the first time in decades, we have witnessed several political assassinations in this country, with people across the political spectrum being targeted.
The killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk yesterday at a college in Utah is just the latest in a series of politically motivated violent acts just in recent months.
Investigators say that Vance Belter posed as a police officer and fatally shot former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark around 3.
A gunman opened fire on a Dallas immigration office, killing 2 detainees and injuring another.
A Pennsylvania man is in custody and charged with setting fire to the governor's mansion in Harrisburg early Sunday morning, after the first night of Passover.
Many have publicly worried that without some form of intervention, we may be headed toward another civil war. But the last civil war in the United States happened so long ago that for most people it's little more than an abstraction, a unit in high school history class. And when most people do think about the Civil War, they tend to think of it in terms of the South pitted against the North over the issue of slavery, with massive armies fighting each other on now famous battlefields, with names like Gettysburg and Antietam. But 160 years ago, things were incredibly more complicated. There were Southerners who were diametrically opposed to slavery and passionate about maintaining the integrity of the Union. And there were large numbers of Northerners who were extremely unhappy with the call to end slavery and the war that followed. And some of them plotted a massive insurrection with allies in the Confederacy.
And there were these radical groups, sort of similar to the Oath Keepers today, or the Proud Boys, called under various names. One of the most famous was Sons of Liberty. Nobody knows how big they are, but they claimed tens of thousands of members. And they will openly start meeting with Confederates to plot a combined assault.
The Confederates in question were soldiers who had escaped from Union prisons and were now living in Canada. Once there, they found like-minded Northerners who had been exiled from the United States for their political beliefs and were more than willing to help thwart Lincoln and the Union Army.
You know, the institutions of American democracy are not as solid as we all hope they would be. And there are some fragile points that a well-committed and organized group of anti-governmental treasonous actors can really target and bring down a government in peacetime, but especially in war.
In the midst of the Civil War, we had a deeply unpopular president in Abraham Lincoln, who had suspended civil liberties and invoked martial law, using as his rationale the threat posed by his political opponents on the national security of the country. Because so much time has passed, it is easy to dismiss the relevance of those times to that of our own. But if you squint just a little bit, you can see the overall shape of many of the same issues we are arguing about today. How powerful should a president be? When should they be able to invoke martial law and imprison Americans without due process? In what way should Congress and the courts intervene when they think a president is behaving badly, against the best interests of the country? What should states do if they disagree profoundly with the policies of the federal government? And what should citizens do if they believe that the country is in danger and that they are not being sufficiently protected by the checks and balances enshrined in the U.S. Constitution? These are precisely the issues that were on the table in the 1860s, and again part of our reality in the here and now.
You can't hide the past. The past is with us. And if we don't recognize the truth of the past, then we're not going to understand the truth of today. And if Americans can't grapple with frankly, the ugly truth of the Civil War, that Lincoln was an embattled, beleaguered president, that for most of his term, he was hugely unpopular. There were riots against him. There were conspiracies. We have to face the darkness in the mirror and not be afraid to learn the lessons from the past.
What we will be doing over the next 6 episodes of this series is a deep dive into a moment in American history that is little known and little understood, but which has much to teach us about the challenges that bedevil our country right now.
A lot of the people who got swept up in this conspiracy would have told you that what they were doing was the most patriotic act. It was the saving of the Republic, the saving of the Constitution, rather than the rejection of it.
The Copperhead Conspiracy, coming January 13th, wherever you get your podcasts.